Hello, I'm John Featherston, the CEO of RISMedia, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's extremely important panel discussion focused on buyer agency essentials, a subject every single real estate professional needs to better understand and master quickly. Today's discussion will focus squarely on strategies and successes and compliance in the new normal. The August deadline for the NAR-settlement changes is just a few weeks away, and we all need to make sure we're doing our best to understand how to avoid the legal landmines and how to strengthen your buyer agency value proposition. Our goal today is to do our best to help you prepare both brokers and agents to be successful and safely conduct your business in this new age of the new normal. Today's session is just 1 hour long. However, if you want to go deeper into buyer agency essentials, please consider attending our 36th annual CEO and Leadership Exchange in Washington, D.C., September 4th to the 6th. Again, our Leadership Exchange in Washington, D.C., September 4th to the 6th. There'll be more than 400 of our industry's most influential decision makers who will be addressing this subject and others which are facing our industry's future now. So please look for an email from me inviting you to join us there. You will not be disappointed. It is a worthwhile investment in your professional career. Now let's get started. Joining me today to discuss buyer agency essentials are 5 incredible experts. They are Gretchen Pearson, the president and owner of Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, Drysdale Properties; Kendall Bonner, a realtor and an attorney, and the leader of the Kendall Bonner team with eXp Realty, where she is also the VP of Industry Relations. Anthony Lamacchia, he's one of the nationally known figures that has grown up in this industry, and he's the broker owner and CEO of Lamacchia Realty and Lamacchia Companies. And Brian Donnellan, the president and CEO of Bright MLS, a true leader in that sector. And finally, another extremely accomplished real estate professional and an attorney as well, from Howard Hanna / Rand Realty, their chief creative officer, and my co-moderator for today's event, Joe Rand. Now, Joe, you and I have had the pleasure of knowing each other for many, many years, as we do know our panelists. All of our respective careers have been through many different challenges. However, what we're facing in our industry today may be the single most important challenge our industry has faced in decades. Before we open this up to our panelists, Joe, how do you see where we are today? And in your opinion, what should we be doing?
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me. It's really an honor always to do these events with RISMedia and Real Estate Magazine, and you've put together a really accomplished panel, and so I appreciate that. It makes the job of moderating so much better when I can basically say, welcome everybody, and then the next thing I say is, all right, we're out of time, have a great day, and they just carry the rest of the hour that we have. To answer your question, I would say just 2 quick things. One is, what we are really hitting now is, we've only had buyer agency in this industry for about 40 years. And that's why these changes are coming and hitting so hard, is that we're still in sort of buyer agency infancy. When seller agency was only 40 years old, we still had open listings, we still had exclusive agency listings. We had not developed what we think of as the services we provide to sellers. And so 40 years into buyer agency, we still really had not until now developed the fluency of all the things we need to do for buyers. And I think that's going to happen in a very quick way. But I know we can do it, John. And you know why I know we can do it? Is because 4 years ago, in March of 2020, there were maybe 20 agents in the country that knew how to use Zoom. And by April of 2020, every agent in the country knew how to use Zoom and knew how to set up virtual backgrounds. And they took to it. And we sold houses during a pandemic. And if we could master that and what we had to do back 4 years ago, I am quite certain that the industry can adapt to what's going on today. So I'm very optimistic about where we're going to go and what we're going to hear about today and where the industry is going to go over the next many years.
Well, Joe, listen, that's a great example. And you know what? With every crisis, there is an opportunity. And when you look at the folks on this panel, you take a look at one of the brightest brightest executives running MLSs in this entire industry is with us today. Some of the most innovative brokerage minds are with us today. And I think this challenge is just a challenge. The consumer has voted with their wallet. They want to be represented by real estate professionals. They need our services. So with that, Joe, why don't we start our discussion with our panelists and get them involved?
Yeah, let's get started. I want to talk to everybody and get their opinion generally on industry practices. I'm going to start with Anthony. Anthony, you've been an outspoken champion of the industry throughout this lawsuit, all through the lawsuit period, now with the settlement, now that the settlement terms are all decided. Looking forward, what do you think that the industry, what are the primary things that we have to do to adapt to these new realities that we're facing?
Geez, I've never heard anybody say I've been outspoken. That's a shock. I'm kidding. Yes, obviously I have, and I have my passionate feelings about different aspects of it. But I think one thing everyone has to do is just accept it and accept the fact that this is the new norm. And though many of us think and know that there are aspects of the changes that are not any better whatsoever for consumers, and in some ways worse for consumers, we have to accept it, and we still have to do what is best for our clients. We have to teach our agents to do what is best for our clients. And not every aspect, the overarching principles of what we realtors do and what we leaders on this screen do in teaching realtors to do haven't changed. You know, do what's best for your client, make recommendations that are best for them, help them navigate the sale process and get an understanding of how things work and how to land that house and how to sell that house for the most money. The overarching principles haven't changed, but the finite details in some manners have. Now, you know, we operate in 6 states. 2 of the states that we're in, New Hampshire and Connecticut, already require mandatory buyer agency agreements. So to the agents in those states, they're like, yeah, what's the big deal? I see them losing focus during training. But some of the other things, obviously are a little bit more challenging, communication of compensation and things like that. But to quote our great president of the National Association of Realtors, Mr. Kevin Sears, he says, realtors are problem solvers, and they'll problem solve their way through this. And I agree with Kevin on that.
Excellent. Let me turn to Gretchen to get her into this. As someone, you're running a large, huge company out of California. What do you see as specifically some of the industry practices that agents are going to need to adapt to?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'm also honored to be a part of it. You know, I would agree with Anthony. This is a great opportunity. It is a little bit of a mindset. What I've seen in my 37 years of being in the business is that real estate agents are street fighters, and they will figure out how and what to do this. And so for me, I think that it's number one, the mindset, that this is not, in some regards, that there is a formalization of the process that we haven't done, that we need to make sure that we cross the T's and dot the I's. But if you really look at it in regard to having a relationship or forming a relationship with the buyers, we've done that. We've had maybe people have chosen to give a freebie to a buyer. Maybe they'll go show a house or two and then decide to have that conversation with buyers about, listen, you know, I'm asking you to commit to me, that I'm going to show you the prices and work hard for you and show you the homes, and I'll work hard for you, and I expect you to be then loyal to me, work with me exclusively. And so we've had that verbal conversation and handshake with trying to formalize it. And really the difference is that, just as we all know, as these 2 attorneys would say on this call, put it in writing. And really that's what we're doing, is clarifying the relationships that we've had forever. So that practice just needs to change in the way of formalizing it. It's not really different than we have. One of the elements that I think that we need to change, again, mindset and then some activities, is that potentially, due to not formalizing that relationship, we haven't made the same investments, particularly of hard cost investments, that we do with sellers under a formalized relationship. And what I mean by that is really we have to approach this as we're representing a buyer with no stone unturned, looking for the properties to it. And under our normal practice, what we do is we go to the multiple listing service, and then we put them on automatic feed of that. And that's kind of the market that we look for. And if we look now at the formalized relationship, you know, I think back over my 37 years, and I have never had a buyer come in and say, I only want used homes. I've never heard them say that. And we need to then go ahead and, for various reasons, for years, we have decided that it is not something that we do as a standard practice to go look at new homes. We need to, whether it's because of our opinion that builders are fickle, whether it's too much work to understand how we register them, you know, what we look to do on it. And so we've just kind of dismissed that. And so under the premise of really no stone unturned, we have to look at that. We have to look at off-market properties so that we can show them a full base of properties and not just a narrow perspective that we have for years.
Excellent. Let me get Kendall in. Kendall, you've got an interesting, besides the fact that you're, like me, a recovering attorney, now working in real estate, you not only run a big team in Tampa, but you're also head of, you're the VP of Industry Relations for EXP. And as part of that job for EXP, you've been out talking to EXP agents from around the country, talking about the new rules. What are the biggest questions and the biggest concerns that you hear agents expressing about this right now?
Yeah, and thank you, everyone. This is such an honor to be here with you all today and to share this message because it's so important and so necessary. And while we have thousands of people in this call, we have millions of real estate professionals. So, you know, as much as we can, if we can touch each and every agent to help guide them through this, you know, that's my heart to do. And so that is part of my mission, is to communicate these changes in a very practical and contextual way to real estate agents. And every time I do my talk, my NAR-settlement updates talk with, you know, hundreds and thousands of agents across the country, I do get tons of questions. And I think, you know, one of the biggest things I'm seeing out there and that I'm actually trying to help agents work through is what I'm calling the great temptation. And the great temptation is this desire by agents and brokers to not see things change as a result of this settlement. So a lot of agents, a lot of brokers are saying it's business as usual, nothing's changing, or things of that nature. And so I'm out there trying to basically debunk that concept because I do think that things are going to change and that we do need to be prepared for it. And that the longer it takes us to modify our behaviors, the more traumatic and difficult this evolution of our industry is going to be. So with that being said, I think that a lot of the questions that I think brokers are going to need to be prepared to answer because I think that change is coming along these lines are, you know, how to manage concessions. Concessions are a place that has been a carve out for in the NAR settlement for a seller to communicate an incentive to a buyer. And I think agents are going to be tempted to try to leverage concessions as a way to continue business as usual. And I want to encourage agents and brokers not to do that. We do not want to repeat or create or make similar mistakes as what got us here in the first place. I think so that's one area I think brokers and agents are going to have to get crystal clear on. Another place that I think agents are confronted with questions is around you know, the safety net going away, right? You know, we're doing agency agreements, you know, but it's even more than that because in every state it's a little bit different. Some states have agency, some are transaction based models. And so that is getting a disclosure signed, determining your fiduciary duties to that customer, you know, including obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accounting of funds, reasonable skill, care, and due diligence. That is one disclosure a lot of agents are already used to and conversations they're used to having. It's another one to have a conversation as a buyer, buyer's agent to a buyer, really going deep on your value proposition and the cost that is going to that the buyer is going to have to bear, because with this transition, I tell agents all the time, the buyer agent closing costs or the buyer's closing costs just went up. You know, we're going to potentially see a move from, you know, as a result of this settlement from, you know, buyer agent commissions moving from one side of the settlement statement to the other. Even if the seller ultimately pays it or the seller ultimately gives a credit to the buyer, that is the practical change. And so to me, it's really important to give agents, I think, context as it relates to all of this, I have a saying from college: text without context is pretext, meaning information without explaining and understanding, it leads to false belief, right? And so I think it's really important that brokers and leaders really step up in trying to help agents navigate the parts of this business that will dramatically change. And I think because they're getting these messages out there, it's been a challenge for some agents for sure.
I think the last couple of months have been as fraught as could possibly be, probably more so than any time then in the last 4 years, during COVID and then before COVID. I can't, maybe 2009, because the market had gone down so much, people weren't as anxious as they are now. Let me get Brian in. He's our final panelist that we haven't yet talked to. Brian, as the CEO of one of the largest, most successful MLS systems in the country, how do you see MLS practices adapting to help agents adjust to these new realities? And what are the MLSs? What's their role here now?
Well, again, John and Joe, thanks for having me on here. This is a really important conversation, and I'm really happy to be part of it. First, I would say from my perspective, since I've been in this industry, since about 2006, the MLS and organized real estate has been under tremendous change since then. So I feel like this is just gaining speed, through the mergers and acquisitions and vendors becoming portals and portals becoming brokers and rules just fundamentally changing. And whether you like it or not, it feels like it's just going to continue to be faster. The world's just going to keep changing. And I would say to you, for a lot of different valid reasons, and maybe some that are not valid, this is an industry that doesn't do well with change. And I feel like I can say it a little bit because I live with a broker and an agent, and I feel it almost every day. And think about that. Every time you make a change like we're talking about here, what it is that you have to do, the training you have to do, the forms, everything it is that you do, you lose efficiency what it is you're doing. So as soon as this decision came down, we went full into figuring out how we were going to do this. And what compounds what it is that we do is we're in 6 states and DC. So the rules are a little bit different. Nothing's ever the same. And, for the life of me, I don't know why that is. And if you look at the settlement, the MLSs are in charge of enforcement, which is a real super duper thing to do. But we've been full time with seminars and going to brokers, we have 42 associations. I would have to say that we've been on the road constantly for about a month, webinars, attorneys on webinars, everything. And look, I say this with all due respect, and if this came from a broker who said RDR, realtors don't read. So it makes it even a little bit more difficult to get a consistent message out there. And we know that information is coming from a variety of different points. So, we're going out of our way to make sure everybody knows. We know when the fields are being changed. They were changed in early June. And we're getting ready for the actual date in August. And I will tell you, I don't know if we'll be able to get to everybody, but we're doing everything we can in order to get to them and get them information and have the information out there that they can get to when they need to get to it.
If I could add on that, Joe. Thanks, Brian, and thanks everyone. Putting Brian on the spot as we are, because he represents 100 and some odd thousand of our fellow realtors, and educating those. He runs a very, very sophisticated MLS and information system. Those members are blessed to have that type of organization supporting them. Not everyone in our country is supported by a strong, such a strong organization like Bright MLS. But what we're finding is, I think this is a proven fact, is number one, is money follows value. Okay, and our consumers that want to deal with everyone on this call, the thousands that are tuned in, they want to use a real estate professional to see how the real estate professional is going to help them achieve their goals and objectives as far as their own housing or real estate needs are. They look to us to help them through. Most of them have no clue about the lawsuits and the settlement, or if they do, it's a very superficial understanding of what took place. It's up to everyone on this call to understand if you're going to do business the way you want to do business and capture more market share, the relationships that you have really do matter. And those relationships have to be fully transparent and honest about if you're dealing with a buyer, this is how, this is what I'm going to do for you. This is what I have professional relationships with my MLS, with my broker, with this, with that. But I am going to require you to sign this agreement because I am going to work on your behalf as a buyer to bring you the best opportunities to reach your goals and objectives. Relationships matter, money follows value, and when people don't think that you're going to help them, or you're a means to help them achieve their goals and objectives, they'll stop calling. They'll gladly pay, I believe. What we're going to find is this is just another minor blip for real professionals in our industry, and every one of you on this call is already mastering this to deal with the consumers that want our professional help.
Thank you. Building on what John just said, what I'd like to do now is we've got everybody in the discussion. I want to drill down now to some specifics, actionable items, advice that we can give to people on this call. Because what's interesting is that, yeah, we have this kind of general trend of change in the industry, but when you drill down to it, and anyone who wants to correct me on this can correct me on this or amplify it, is that there are three specific things that agents need to do now that they were not generally doing before. And the first is persuading buyers to sign buyer agreements, which, other than, as Anthony said, there are some states where everybody signed it, but the states where people were not mandated to sign it, they've not really been in the practice of doing that. So they haven't really been in the practice of doing buyer presentations or explaining their value differentiation to buyers. So that's something that's new to a lot of agents. Number two is we always had kind of these offers of compensation, but it was never something that was discussed in any kind of real detail with sellers, because sellers, they had the option not to make the offer. That's kind of a misconception. They always had that option, but very few really want to discuss any detail. And then the third thing is that if there is no offer of compensation, then finding a way to offload the obligation to pay the commission from the buyer into the proceeds of the sale with some sort of conditional offer or some other means of doing that. So three things that we've never really had to do before, and these are the things that agents have to learn how to do. So I'm going to ask for anybody who wants to jump in to give us some, there you go, Anthony, give us some advice about these kind of three things or something else that I might have missed.
Well, thanks, Joe. And one of the big things I want the audience to realize, and I recognize there's plenty of audience members that are like, what's the big deal? I've had a buyer agency agreement signed, or if they're in a state where there's no agency, what's the big deal? I've had a buyer contract signed. Then this is just reinforcement for them. But for the rest of the audience, which is the masses, it's concerning. Our biggest state that we operate in is Massachusetts. Buyer agency agreements are not required in Massachusetts. And we have had over 11,000 buyer agency agreements signed since 2017 up until May 31st. So the notion of getting a buyer agency agreement signed is not some new thing. I've been teaching it not only in my company, but in our sister company, Crush It, in real estate across the country since 2013. I've been on stages with Kendall. I've been on stages with you, Joe, where we've talked about things like this. It is not difficult to get a buyer agency agreement signed. It is not difficult to get a buyer to understand that a fee is going to be due. There are no consumers in the world that expect to obtain things for free. The average consumer does not expect a real estate agent, a realtor, to work for free. That is just not how consumers see things, and that's why consumers have a heightened awareness of what is this going to cost me? Can I bring the cost down? And those things have been going on for decades, despite what the plaintiff's attorneys try to say. There's no negotiating and all that stuff that we all know is not true. Okay, so the idea of getting them signed is easy. When realtors are talking about the things that buyers want, then buyers are attracted to working to them. Gretchen alluded to one a little bit earlier, and it falls under the realm of what I always say. Buyers want a large selection, they want a good deal, and they want it to be easy. Think about what company in the world has absolutely nailed the art of getting masses of consumers to believe that they have a large selection, good deals, and they make it easy? Amazon. And Amazon is growing so much that they literally can't buy trucks fast enough. They can't build buildings fast enough because they have mastered the art of getting the consumer to realize they have what they want. So when realtors talk to buyers about what they want, large selection, good deal, and making it easy on them to obtain properties, get them access to properties that aren't listed yet. That's what Gretchen alluded to, off-market properties, properties with recent price adjustments. What about down south? Properties with foreclosures or short sales, or what about properties that haven't come on the market yet? You know, there's plenty of sellers that say, please expose my home before we list it. Okay, if you've got your form signed correctly with the MLS, nothing wrong with that, right? Expose those properties. When you talk about what the buyer is interested in, they are attracted to working with you, and they're where do I sign? Much different than doing what many realtors do. What many realtors do when they get on the phone with a buyer is they start hitting them with, are you pre-approved? Do you have a realtor? And all these self-serving questions. Put the self-serving questions aside, make them secondary, make the primary what the buyers want, and they'll be lined out the door, down the street.
Anybody else get in on this? What specific things do buyers need? Yeah, go ahead, Gretchen.
Yeah, you know, for me, I agree with John in the way of that this is a blip and a moment of it. And this is probably the most difficult, not just due to the communication or the education of everyone, but if we take a look at it, there needs to be some conversation with the buyer also about the cross intersection of price and cost of sale, right? Because the cost of sale is just getting moved. And theoretically, under economic principles, if the cost of sale is getting moved, that would mean that the price is also probably getting a movement on it. And so these strategies, or the cross sections of marketing, merchandising, and pricing strategies, are all longer conversations, not just with the sellers, but particularly with the buyers on it. So that's number one. That then leads into the other piece of why I think this is the most difficult. It will be very difficult for us to actually price things for the next period of time because of that cost of sale. So the other piece that I would say that would be helpful is to make sure you've lined up your ecosystem. If you haven't spoken directly with your lender and that they're pre-qualifying them with the cost of money that would be available, and they haven't taken in consideration the new settlement agreement, you're going to have a beef around expectations. And that's going to not feel good for the buyers in the way of somebody's telling them this, and this is what it's turning out. So those expectations need to be lined up with the lender, with escrow, with title, whatever it works into, you know, your environment, your state. And the last thing that I would say would be something to remember, and maybe this is not as, hopefully it's more than a closing line, but we're mostly concerned within the industry, these first-time home buyers and their cash crunch and the affordability issue. And quite frankly, if these buyers, this is their biggest and first purchase in their life, the biggest financial, they really can't afford not to use a professional. And so we get all concerned that, oh my gosh, well, literally there has to be an expectation is that the risk that they would bear by either, you know, doing it themselves by the way, they could have always done it by themselves. We've seen very small percentage of that wanting to happen, but how could they risk it if this is their hard-earned scratch that they have, that this is going to present their trajectory towards financial independence for themselves or their family? They need a professional, and they understand that. Just like Anthony said, they want to pay for good service. We need to just be able to articulate that.
Joe,
Go ahead, Brian.
yeah, I was just going to offer just a couple things here, you know, a bit from an outsider in terms of the MLS, in terms of the business. And I wanted to, I think, also piggyback on something that that Anthony said earlier about it being an opportunity. So, you know, at Bright, we have the opportunity to do a lot of different surveys. We brought John, you see Dr. Lisa Sturdivant all the time. We brought her on, and she likes to do a lot of different research. And some of the research, while I think should come seemingly easy to you, I think it points out a couple things that we need to highlight on what we should be doing. And that is, you know, the MLS, the broker, the agent, everybody's got to every day show what it is that their value in this. And it's just, it's a contact sport. You have to do that every day. But there were three key findings when we did a survey with buyers out there of what it is that they're looking for from a buyer's agent. It's risk mitigation, it's real estate expertise, and it's transparency. And I don't think we deal. again, with the folks I deal with, I don't think they treat those with the respect that each of those have, this, specifically the transparency. And the other thing that came out clearly in the survey is that buyers agents are not doing a good job clearly articulating what their value is in this. I mean, the data all supports that buyers and sellers want to use agents, you know, and there's some mixed data about, you know, they don't use the same one every time. And I think that has to do with trust, transparency, and some other things. So I think if we focus, brokers and agents focus on those things, I think they can really separate themselves from the rest of the folks out there.
Kendall, let me make sure you get in to talk about some of these specifics that when you're talking to these EXP agents around the country, what kinds of tips or tricks are you hearing from them or giving to them?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what's beautiful is that a lot of what was said is in alignment with what a lot of what I teach and where I'm trying to focus agents going forward. And so, you know, one of the things that I tell agents, you know, to focus on going forward is focus on the facts and not your fears, right? And I find that fear is often a reflection of a lack of knowledge or a lack of experience. And what I want to remind people is that we're kind of all experiencing this together because of the fact that the safety net of the MLS, unilateral offer of compensation is going away for all of us, basically. So that is a new thing. So what can we do instead is we can show up at events like this and build our knowledge bank and get prepared by learning from great teachers like I'm learning on this call as well, and then being able to take that information and go apply it in the streets, right? The other thing I'm focusing agents on is the number one skill set that I think every agent has in the past, in my opinion, has undervalued because they've taken it for instinct, is negotiation skills. I think that agents need to focus on their negotiation skills because every part of the conversation you're having with consumers from the day you meet them to the day you close is a constant negotiation. You're negotiating from the call to some sort of consultation so that you can meet with them and get that face-to-face time. You're negotiating with them to sign an agreement to hire you and understand your value proposition. You're negotiating with the seller and the listing agent, you know, and all the various terms of that agreement now, including your compensation. And then you're going to be negotiating from contract to close, as we always have done. But it's a skill set that I think talk about raising the bar of professionalism. Raising the bar on negotiation skills, I think, is going to have the greatest impact on ROI of a real estate professional in this industry more than any other in the past. And then in alignment with what it's so funny, Anthony and I, we talk about, we do a lot of stuff together, but we really do have a similar mind. And I'm older than Anthony, so I get to claim that. But I will say this, agents are, I say focus on what buyers want and what their fears are. And so like I had my list of 3 goals that customers have and their correlating fears, which is, a buyer comes to you with the expectation and they have a vision of the home that they envision themselves living in, right? And so it's your responsibility to help them achieve that goal. And they have a fear of missing out on the right property, on the perfect property. So how can you alleviate that? And I give some scripts to my agents on that. The next one is, they expect you to have a plan and a process that you can articulate and explain to them so they can understand what's happening next, because their fear is joining in. They're afraid that they're going to join into a process at the wrong time, not understand what's going to happen, and that they're not feeling properly led. And so if, for example, if you're a real estate professional right now, not talking to your buyers and sellers today about these changes, you are making a mistake. I'm doing a countdown right now. We are 24 business days from August 17th and the changes. 24 business days. There's a good chance people that you're working with today, they are going to not be closed between now and the 17th. This is also a great opportunity to reach out to buyers who have been on the fence and say, hey, now's a great time to take some action because things are going to change after the 17th. And then the third thing that they're looking for, again, very similar to what Anthony was saying, is, they're expecting you to have a strategy for getting them the best deal possible. So they have FOPO, fear of other people's opinions. They do not want to hear from the media or their parents or some other relative how they made a poor decision or that they didn't get the best deal possible. So it's our responsibility to deal with what they want and what their fears are. And that's where I am trying to get our agents to focus, especially as it relates to buyers. So, you know, have a consultative approach. I agree with the conversation about articulating value. In fact, I wrote an article about it out of my frustration with the fact that it's not just as simple, in my opinion, of, you know, treat your buyers like your sellers. Like I think that that is true. We need to apply in principle the same ideas, but how you do a listing consultation and the framework for that is going to look very different when you're building a framework for working with buyers. They have different problems, different challenges, different solutions, different expectations. And so you have to go out and build and articulate that value that speaks to buyers. There's a lot of lists out there, you know, Realtor.com came out with a list, NAR came out with a list, and those are great to, as you know, just common knowledge for building the concept of value to the agent. But if you're going to be unique, you need to be thinking about your unique value proposition, and that's going to come with, you know, what type of technology do you plan to use to improve the client experience? You know, how are you planning to demonstrate knowledge and experience, whether you're a brand new agent or an experienced agent? You need to have a strategy for how you're going to do that, you know?
Thank you. You know, one thing Kendall just said a few minutes ago, which really landed as I was watching. I watch everybody's faces as the conversation goes on. One of the things that really landed was when you talked about negotiation. And I'm not saying that the other things you said were not as valid, but I've heard it again and again about the importance of agents building up their negotiation skills, because they have to negotiate something that they've never really negotiated their compensation with buyers in any kind of on an everyday basis. And they've never really had to negotiate with sellers about the cooperating broker commission. They tended to come up with a commission and either split it in half or keep 60%, give out 40%. So they've negotiated compensation with sellers, but not specifically about the issue of whether you're going to be offering something out. And they've never really had a specific conversation, many of them, with buyers. Give me some specific, and let's try, we have about 20 minutes left. So I want to try to keep the conversations, I want to try to get a lot of quick bites in. Give me some specifics. What tips would you give agents? What are the things they have to build into their negotiating skills? What do we got? What do we need here? Anybody, just jump in.
Oh,
Just
Anthony.
real fast,
Go ahead, Kendall.
just real fast. Agents, of course, there's a designation, but bigger than that, YouTube. Chris Voss, the same guy who wrote Never Split the Difference, has a YouTube video where he talks to realtors, right? And like invest in time and getting skilled in that strategy. And I'll just leave it at that. So that way the rest
So
of
obviously retooling, skill development, scripts, having the ability to have some infographics digitally and whatever, so you are supporting and educating the people you're trying to influence and build their confidence with transparency as to what you will be doing for them and how it helps them achieve their goals and dreams. Gretchen, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think it's even a more basic piece to it is that we still bring bias and we do not listen and overcome objections. Someone says something and we assume, whether it's our bias, that they're meaning this, and we start to defend, we start to sell a different position. And we need to go back. When I started 37 years ago, the company I was with even had flip books. We got, you know, every objection in the world and you had to role play that one. And I think we need some flip books. I think overcoming objections probably left maybe 20 years ago, and we made some assumptive pieces with our own bias. And so that's the start of it. You know, what questions can we ask that are opening ended and try to really understand and remove our bias as to what it is. As Kendall said, a lot of it's just they don't know, or the communication and us to lead them there. But start with skill sets of overcoming objections, which is just listening better, probing.
yeah, I've been teaching objections and rebuttals for 15 years. I've been selling them through Crush It in Real Estate for 12 years, and they're a necessity at all times. What I did find, I will be honest, and I think this is what Gretchen meant, when the market went really, really fast from COVID for about 2.5 years, it really came down to who could just run the fastest, who could get out and meet the most clients, whoever could run the fastest did the most sales. Well, now, and me, Gretchen, Joe, Kendall, we've seen this. Market pulls way back, it slows down. All of a sudden, you got to actually know what you're doing again. And this happened in 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11. And I loved it because I grew every single one of those years. Why? Because I made sure our realtors knew how to do things better than others. Okay, this is a tremendous, tremendous opportunity where in the next 6 months, there's going to be realtors in companies that flounder and struggle. There will be realtors in 3 weeks that go into MLS in 4 weeks and go, something must be wrong with the MLS. Why is there no compensation being offered? Well, they're going to call MLS. They're going to call the listing brokerage. I don't see any compensation. Those are the people that are under rocks. And then there's going to be people that are proactive. That's the people that are tuned in here today. And the people that are proactive, that are on top of things, that either have their forms figured out or damn near figured out, that are already doing trainings on them, that are already teaching. I can't wait till August 17th. I've been training on half of this stuff since 2012. And finally, after all these years of me training on it, all of a sudden, everybody needs it, right? Before, if you ran fast, you had relationships, you could get away with a little bit here and there. Well, now the idea of buyer agency agreements being mandatory, the idea of somehow, some way negotiating compensation into the purchase agreement, whether it's through a closing cost credit, now the new phrase is seller's concession, or it's just building into the offer when you make it, or just the buyer paying it out of pocket. Now you got to have your language down. You got to have your forms down. You have to have all this stuff down. And those that have it down, their businesses are going to do this. Those that don't, they're at least going to experience a real slowdown for the next 6 months.
Good. Brian, do you want to get in on this? About negotiation?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry.
About negotiation. We're talking about negotiation. I want to make sure that you got a chance to weigh in if you want to weigh in.
You know, the only thing here is you've got the professionals talking about that, and I don't want to comment on that. The only thing that I would say to you is when it comes to what it is that they're looking for, there's a tremendous amount of data and insight in your MLS. And if one of the things that these guys are looking for, and the best way to negotiate, is you just can't fake it. I mean, you've got to know the market, you got to know the area, you got to know everything about your client in the area that they're looking for. And to me, you know, knowledge is king. That's what they're looking for.
They've got the best through it. I'd like to add into that. And, you know, Brian, you're very humble there. Your members and others represented by other great MLSs, they're represented by the single greatest set of information available since the beginning of time on real estate. Okay, the MLSs provide the data, the information that helps not just the professional assist their buyers and sellers with the real estate needs. They give them all the information necessary, but it's up to the Gretchens of the world and the Kendalls of the world and the Anthonys of the world to interpret that data, okay, on the behalf of their clients in a more realistic and meaningful way as it applies to each one of their clients. Because data by itself is very valuable, but data interpreted as the end result or goal of your clients could be quite different for many of your buyers and or sellers. So the interpretation of data, the negotiation of that data is extremely important.
Well, and
Yeah, just to add on to that, you know, you're right. Most folks are going to listen to and they're going to hear a national sort of housing report. And we all know, even within Bright, you know, it goes from really good to horrible, you know, in a zip code next to it. So let's not pretend that you can't bring more to the table.
Well, and Joe, let me just add to what Brian's saying for a second. I've done over 250 live news segments on network news in New England since 2011. And people say, how do you do that? Who are you paying? How do I do it? I take information out of MLS. I look at average sale prices, the amount of homes listed, how many homes being listed in a week, pendings, the rates of pendings. We put the information out to the market on our own platform. Down the bottom, it specifically says per MLS, and the news calls. And that's something that's right under people's noses, and many realtors aren't using it, and they should. We are lucky to be in a business that everyone wants to hear about. When Brian and Joe and all of us go to family parties and friends cookouts on weekends all summer, when we walk in, people say, how's the real estate market? Okay. My brother's in the landscaping business. My brother says, geez, nobody ever says to me, how's the landscaping business? We're in a business that everyone cares about. You need to play that card and utilize that, because that'll also help you attract buyers and have buyers want to work with you.
You know, the point that Brian made, which now has been amplified by John and Anthony, it just kind of strikes home how much, when we're sort of saying to these agents, hey, listen, you provide enormous value to buyers. Stop being self-conscious about it. They take for granted so much of the value they give that they don't even talk about it. Like the idea that you can get access to all the sold information of everything that has sold in that market from the beginning of time until yesterday is something that buyers do not stress. I mean, and that's information. If you're a buyer, or you want to go direct to the listing agent, great, because the listing agent has all that information, but they have no obligation to share with you. In fact, they're obligated not to share with you because they work for the seller. That's what you get when you have a buyer agent. And it's similar to, like, we don't ever talk in those states where, like in my states, we have fiduciary responsibilities to the buyer. We almost never talk about the fact that when you're a buyer agent, you have the same responsibilities to a buyer that a lawyer does. These are the same fiduciary responsibilities lawyers have. And everybody thinks of lawyers as being, oh my God, that's so great. We don't talk about it. It's not something that we stress and not something to articulate. But I did want to go,
if I could, I just want to insert something before you keep going, okay? Number
Sure.
one, we have to do a better job of packaging who we are and how we work on the behalf of our client. And if you don't have a great elevator pitch with the right script, defining what you do on a daily basis, you can't make it up. Brian pointed it out. Okay, you can't fake it. You've got the information. You can disseminate the information. You can explain the information. You can articulate your skills to say, I've been through this before with other clients. Let me talk to you about how I think you can better handle your goals and objectives. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to follow up with Gretchen about something she said earlier, and I made a little note here to make sure I followed up with her, because she said some things about how the buyer commission is shifting over to something that's now an obligation of the buyer rather than in most cases being paid out of the proceeds of the sale, which was, let's just remember, it's paid by the buyer, the seller then has it, and then the seller pays it out of the proceeds of the sale. That's the mechanics of it. And she seemed to presuppose, Gretchen, you seem to presuppose that there would be many situations, and maybe as a percentage, I'm going to ask you what kind of percentage of situations where the buyer would come out of pocket to pay the buyer agent compensation rather than have it be paid out of an offer of compensation from the seller in the traditional fashion, or as a condition of the sale being paid out of the proceeds of the sale by, like Anthony talked about, that you make it a seller concession, you make it a condition of the offer, you build it into the offer price. What do you think that there's going to, I just don't know, after the next 20, how many we got, Kendall? 24 days?
Yeah,
24 business days. 24 business. By the way, it's the first time I've ever seen a realtor talk about business days, because they're all business days. So it's more like 30 days, because every day is a business day for a real estate agent. But 24 business days we have. Once we hit the ground in August, what percentage of the times do you think the buyer is going to pay that out of pocket, and how often is that going to happen?
I think that
I'm asking Gretchen. She's not brought it up.
Number one, I think that that's market condition, right? So if we go into a place that there is a ton of listings and the seller is saying, oh my God, do whatever we can take. So it's going to be driven by market. But where a lot of us are all getting carried away on, and it's the wrong focus on this commission, is the truth of the matter is, particularly if you're looking at sellers, and I know this is a buyer essential piece, but what we need to be talking about is net sheets, not so much commission. It doesn't really matter on what it is. And so if we're talking to the seller about a net sheet, okay, great. It doesn't really matter what they're paying. They need to get the amount, whether it's the price, whether it's concessions. And on the buyer side just needs to, just as you guys said, they need to be able to afford it if that's our issue. Do they have enough funds right now to purchase? And so, that's where we're getting lost in the commission piece, is that we're putting ourselves, as you said before, Joe, we're putting our perspective in, which is commission, and it doesn't really matter. The seller doesn't really care. And so as that cost of sale goes, one of the things, and again, I know we're talking about buyers, but it should go on both sides, is that it should be a range right now, right, for both sides in the way of whether it goes. You don't just give one net sheet. That's why I'm saying get your ecosystem involved, because it's not just this is what, approximately, I know we're not fortune tellers to know what the price is, but we typically have said, okay, this is about a net sheet is, well, no, it's a range. And again, it's, we're assuming maybe a cost of sale piece that we've fallen into historically, but it's the buyer side too. And that's why the lender should look at that. They should go ahead and say, cost needed to close is in this range to it, so that expectations are there. But we need to move off this myopic picture of that it's all about commission. It's what the seller is going to net and what the buyer can afford. That's it.
Well, commissions have been negotiable since the beginning of time. I mean, I've been doing this 20 years. Every listing appointment I ever went on, they asked some question about commission. Naturally, some push back more than others.
Without question.
Still to that same, Anthony, we write a net sheet based upon for that seller, and I know we're talking about buyers, what it is that we land on. And in the same regard, if we're either postponing that decision for the seller, the point that offer comes in, we're running a net sheet and saying, is this going to get you where you want to go? And then to the other side, the buyer side, is that, listen, this is, once we find out what it's going to be without making the assumptions, say, well, this is where we've ended up with the negotiations. Do you want to proceed? Is this the house that you want? You feel comfortable with the payment? You feel comfortable with the cash needed? Those are the conversations without us going, Mr. Buyer, are you okay paying me this amount? Well, they don't care whether they've got this amount of cash. And that's why I'm saying go back to the lender. The problem is that when the expectations are missing, and if we looked at as an example with buyers, when we had the really strong trajectory of interest rates going up, the only impact of were the buyers that were currently in that market. So they were shopping, and the lender told them that they could afford a 4-bedroom because the interest rates were so low, and they were out shopping for 4 bedrooms. And in the middle of that process, they come back and they can only afford a 3-bedroom, and so they're pissed. This is not a good experience for them. And then a new crop of buyers come in, and the lender says, well, you can only afford a 3-bedroom because the interest rates are up. They don't get, that's what they go look for, is 3 bedrooms. And they're not having a takeaway experience to it. And that's why I think, as John said, that this is a blip. There's quite a few things that are in transition, not just the agents or the industry's understanding of what this is. The data is a bit of a blip. The buyers are a bit of a blip on who's in the market right now. The sellers are in a blip right now. As all of those go into and we get further away from this, just as you said and begin with, Anthony, it'll settle in.
If I could bridge on that, if I could for a moment, Gretchen, so well said. It wasn't that long ago. Do you remember the housing crunch of 2010, that era? Okay, when there were more distressed properties on the marketplace, short sales. I mean, people prior to the real estate recession there of 2008, 9, 10. I would strongly suggest that over half of the real estate professionals in this country had no idea what a short sale was, okay? And had no idea what just really distressed properties were, okay? It's like during COVID, if I said to any of the agents I would talk to, are you dealing with any distressed properties? They thought I was talking about the virus, okay? Now, here we are. Okay, we're in a brand new era in real estate, and just like we attacked, Joe, you said the Zoom. Okay, there's a reason why we had to adjust our mores and our work habits, because we had to communicate. We needed this Zoom. Okay, we adjusted, we conquered. Now, what's happening here with the rapidly approaching new guidelines, okay? We need the people that are really going to do the transactions, the agents that are really going to be professional real estate agents, to understand and get that training so that all the things we've mentioned in this 1 hour together, they're doing, and they're doing seamlessly and effortlessly. They're disseminating the data. They're explaining the data. They're explaining their value. They're negotiating, as Kendall so articulately said. They talk about transparency. They don't talk about every single home, a new home. For God's sakes, yes, you want to see a new home? I'm going to show you new homes. Okay. They're showing, as Anthony said, a home that hasn't yet hit the market. As long as it's being done by the rules and regulations, we're showing them. Okay. We're showing our value, but we need all of our, if you're a broker, all of your agents need to be trained. They need to be in lockstep to understand I'm representing your brokerage firm and myself, and I'm going to go out and I am going to explain my value proposition to my consumers in a way they can understand and they will want to do business with me. And you know what? Part of that is training. I know there's a lot of different certifications and this and that coming out, but I would tell you strongly, get trained. There's one that I think is going to be very good. It's called the CFSP, and that is going to be introduced apparently next week with a consortium of trainers. If you're interested in that, that is taking place next July 22nd at 10 a.m. Pacific time. That's the Brian Buffini update. They're going to be talking about that. There's others, but that one is really spectacular. Training with scripts, et cetera, et cetera. Anthony helps thousands of people prepare themselves for this new normal. But if we don't educate ourselves to the point where we can talk intelligently to our customers now, you just can't turn it on. You're a professional. And I'll take this opportunity to also do the following, okay? Anyone that's out there listening, okay? I mentioned at the beginning, this is only a 1-hour show. September 4th through September 6th in Washington, D.C. Is our 36th annual RISMedia CEO and Leadership Exchange. It's up on the screen. We spend 2.5 days talking about the issues that are affecting your business and your careers. And if you want to invest in your career, come to the CEO Exchange and be with 400 of the leaders in the industry who are charting the changes necessary to succeed. Someone said to me the other day, if inventories goes up across the board, we'll pick a number, by 8% or so, well, you shouldn't be happy saying, oh my goodness, well, my company has an opportunity to grow by 8%. You're in the wrong marketplace if you're doing that. 8%, if it's going to go up 8% in your market, you should be picking up 30% of the marketplace because your people and your teams are trained to help the consumers the right way. Okay, there's opportunities in this industry and there's a lot of them, but it's not for everyone. It's for the people like everyone on this panel that seizes the opportunity, that consistently gets better at what they do in helping the American consumer buy and sell the houses and real estate, achieve their dreams. I'm gonna turn this back to Joe for a minute.
Yeah, we're up against it, but I did promise all of you that we would give you an opportunity at the end to give us one takeaway. So I'm going to give you all 30 seconds, but we got to keep to 30 seconds. We're already at 3 o'clock. So I'll start with Kendall, Gretchen, Anthony, Brian, in a row. Give me one takeaway that you want to leave the audience with, some hard point, some actionable point, whatever you want to do. It's your floor for 30 seconds.
Yeah, I would just say when talking to sellers, for my listing agents out there about buyer agent commissions, treat it like it's a marketing incentive to the buyer, not about the buyer's agent any longer. This is now about the buyer and how we can impact, like Gretchen said, buyer affordability. So some language change I think is needed. And so please focus on amending your language so that as we go forward, we can continue to raise the bar.
That's a great point. Gretchen.
Yeah, mine's very tactical. And I think, again, when we talk about how we've done business, how it's migrated to ease of things with Zoom and all to it, at least in California, back in the short sale timeframe, we started this with just submitting offers. And I would think buyers would be horrified to know that that's still a practice, and it is, at least in California, where their representative doesn't even go and speak for them. We send the offer. And so for me, as you're building what your services are for a buyer, don't underestimate that. You would not want the plaintiff's attorney speaking for the defendant, right? And so you need to at least ask, and onto the other side, if you're a listing agent and someone is asking to present you the offer, and it could be by Zoom, then accept that. And if you're representing a buyer and that's part of your package, or put it part of your package and ask that listing agent. I'm not talking about the olden days, John, when we go in the seller's living room and, you know, that awkwardness. You would just go to the agents and present and speak for your client.
All right, Anthony, great point. Anthony.
Everyone needs to remember that everyone in the industry is dealing with this. When COVID first hit, I remember saying to our people, hey guys, everyone's dealing with COVID, not just our company. So everyone needs to remember that. By the time we get to the end of the year, every realtor out there is going to know what's going on. Everybody's going to be on an equal playing field and having to deal with it. That's number one. Number two, I have hours of things I could say and I won't. Follow me on Instagram and follow Crush It in Real Estate on YouTube. I'm putting out an extensive video by Friday morning that will go over how our company is dealing with compensation and some of these other things. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Anthony. Brian, you get the final word.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me here. Again, whether you like the settlement or not, it's done. The terms are pretty clear. If you find yourself trying to rework the way you used to do it, please stop. I mean, this is a new way of doing business. Well, actually, it's not a new way of doing business. It's a clear way of doing business. And I'm still astounded by how many folks out there, professionals in this industry, don't know what it is that's going on or how to deal with it. So please find out.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everybody. John, I'll give you the actual last word to say goodbye to everybody.
My actual last word is, first of all, Joe, you're terrific. Thank you, my friend. You're such a value to our industry. And to Brian, Anthony, Gretchen, and Kendall, it is definitely an honor to have you on one of our webinars. I look forward to seeing all of you in September in Washington, Brian's near hometown. See you then.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye, everybody.
I will
See you in
be there.
September.
I will be there. Thank you.
Thank you.